Hello, everyone, and good morning and good afternoon. Welcome to our You Up Abroad webinar on today's topic, What to Say When You Don't Know What to Say, Approaches to Caring and Constructive Dialogue with an Educator-to-Educator Conversation. So welcome, everyone. So I would just like to also say thank you again for those who registered with us because 10% of the total registration fee collected from today's webinar will go directly to Gabby, the Vaccine Alliance, and this is to help combat global COVID vaccine inequity around the world. And so just a little bit more about Gabby. It is a wonderful organization that is supporting 92 low and middle income economies, enabling access to donor-funded doses of safe and effective COVID-19 vaccines. And you can actually find the link to their website on our registration page if you are interested in learning more about them. So thank you for not only supporting in a Black-owned business, but also contributing to a wonderful cause and helping us fight against the COVID-19. So thank you, everyone. Thank you. You are incredible. So with that said, please allow me to introduce myself. Some of you may already be familiar with me, but my name is Dr. Shantia Key, and I am the CEO and founder of You Up Abroad. And you will see in the chat messages that there is another person there, Dawn Harris-Wooten, who is my amazing partner in crime, and she is the director of business development and operations at You Up Abroad. So you can go ahead and say hello to her in the chat box if you like. And you will have the opportunity to hear from Dawn a little bit later throughout our presentation. All right, and just to give you some insight about You Up Abroad, so our mission is to build an accessible and engaging network of thought leaders and change makers traditionally underrepresented in international education. And so we bring underrepresented communities in international ed together and to really share stories of resilience and exchange resources to tackle societal issues and offer a community of support that deliberately and intentionally uplift and focus on diverse perspectives and communities. So that's You Up Abroad. So I invite you to take a look at our website, get to know us a little bit more, follow us on LinkedIn or Facebook, just at You Up Abroad is our name. So please join us. Okay, so this webinar is intended to be engaging. So we have several ways that you can engage with us today. So let me just go ahead and share some of these options with you. So first, if you look on the bottom of your screen, you should see something that says ask a question, people, maybe even the chat box, which I see some people saying hi in there. Hi, hello, I see you. This is, I would like just to point out that the ask the question box is really an opportunity for you to ask any questions you would like. And the really cool thing about this is that participants in the webinar, you can upvote on any of the questions that resonates with you. Okay, so there may be some questions in there already or coming soon, but feel free as we continue to speak throughout this webinar to just go ahead and ask your question. Second, of course, we will use the chat box to engage with each other. And Dawn is there and she will continue to watch our chat box throughout the event just to make sure we're catching everything. And she may also share helpful links that you can bookmark later and reference later. If you accidentally throw a question in there, that's okay. We'll catch it. We'll add it to the question box as well. So it is being monitored. And then third, we'll also have an opportunity to use some polls. All right. So you may have some questions that's coming up. So actually, let's go ahead and test that right now. So there's a poll that I just put in here. Just asking a little bit about how are you feeling today? So just to get you all familiar, if you can look in polls and answer this question, how are you feeling today? We have great, pretty okay-ish, talk to me when I had coffee, which I feel you because I haven't had coffee yet, so I would be clicking that one. And then, of course, not that great with this sad face. And I'm really hoping that you feel better if you select that one. So please go ahead and just tell us how you're feeling. So we have a pretty, I see the results coming in here. Oh, yeah, pretty okay-ish. Yeah. Coffee, like I said, I feel you. So that's just a great example of how we will engage. There is also one more thing. Verbal engagement. There will be an opportunity to have verbal engagements as well. So throughout the presentation, I may ask a question, Don may ask a question, Dr. Cruz may ask a question. So if you have a question that you would like to verbally answer, use the hand raise icon. And if you look at our chat box, you'll see that Dawn has raised her hand, in which case then Dawn could say something verbally if she would like. So that opportunity is there for you. However, I would just like to mention that if you would like to be seen on camera, you can turn on the camera. It's called a toggle camera, but it is not required. You can just be a voice as well. So I'll invite you onto stage whenever we get to that part if you're interested. So, all right, excellent. So, why is this topic important? Why is it important? Why are we talking about this? Why do we care? Well, we believe that it will allow you to increase your personal awareness. We also recognize that there are few safe places where we can ask questions without being judged. So we strive to be that space, that supportive space for you. We also know that we cannot change our attitudes and behaviors without being educated, right? So this webinar is an opportunity to come together and learn something new. And again, why should we care? Well, we are in a constantly changing demographic, which requires us to be global thinkers and citizens. And we also work in a highly diverse spaces. So it's very important that we learn how to communicate with each other. And this is really our chance to challenge the systems of privilege and oppression. And at the same time, we are responsible for respecting and holding space for each other. And so that is why we thought that this topic was so important. And I'm just so excited that we just have an opportunity to come together and just talk about this. So I'm going to take a moment and I'm going to show you a very, very, very brief video clip. And while you're watching, I want you to think about the type of conversations you've had throughout this pandemic, and also throughout your career. All right. I want you to just think about that. And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hit play. And while you're watching it, I also want you to answer a poll question. I'm going to show you another poll question, which is, have you ever experienced a conversation similar to this? That is the poll question. All right. So let me go ahead and play this video, and then let's see what you all think. All right, so that was like super, super, super fast. So I think if it was a little too fast for you, in the chat box, I believe Don will put the text of this conversation inside. But just for reference, essentially, this was a text conversation between two people. One of the persons, unfortunately, they was let go from their job, which is something that we've all experienced during this pandemic, or not all of us, but a lot of us have experienced. And, they're looking for some sort of something from the person they're texting. And, you get the traditional, oh, I'm sorry to hear about that. And then they go, well, you'll find something soon. Companies are really trying to find or fill that diversity quota, so you'll be fine. Okay, thanks, I guess, with a little thumbs up. So in the poll, tell me, how have you ever experienced something like this? Let's see here. So it looks like that all of you, so far at least 3 of you who voted, have said yes. This is a very unfortunately common situation that can happen to us. And perhaps you were the job seeker or the person that is who lost their job, or maybe you're the friend that responding. But no matter your role, this is an example of one way our intentions do not always equal impact. Sometimes our good intentions, as they say, such as an offhanded comment like, oh, companies are trying to fill the diversity quota, as a response to a person of color, it does not have the intended impact, right? So although it was supposed to be a compliment, that person is more than the color of their skin. They're more than a diversity quota. So that's why we decided to create this webinar, because we need to have these type of conversations. How can we be better? How can we educate each other and really be compassionate in our responses to each other? All right. So by the end of this webinar, you will learn and understand that intention does not always equal impact during conversations. You'll also learn 3 strategies to develop compassionate and constructive dialogue. You'll also develop skills and awareness of your vulnerability by owning imperfect phrasing and unintentional mistakes, and also connect and move in towards collaborative support in solutions, empowerment, and transparency. All right, so those are our learning outcome and our goals for today. So I am so excited for all of you. We're going to have some fun. So I would now like to introduce our speaker for today. We have the amazing Dr. Carmen Cruz. And Dr. Cruz is a licensed psychologist and diversity educator and consultant. And she is currently the Associate Director and Director of Training at Texas Women's University Counseling Center. And she also provides private consultation to institutions and businesses that aim to improve inclusion in their organizations. And Cruz has earned degrees at Florida International University and Nova Southeastern University. And her professional interests include social justice, teaching, supervision, psychology of gender, cultural spiritual development, and the impact of stigma. And her strength really lies in her ability to connect with others and providing opportunities to increase personal awareness through authentic stories and laughter. And so Dr. Cruz believes an authentic connection to self and others is the road to personal freedom. So Dr. Cruz is really awesome. So I'm so excited for you. So I'm just going to go ahead and pull her up, and then in just a second I'm going to go ahead and turn on Dr. Cruz's camera whenever you are ready. One thing I would like to mention, in addition to having an amazing resume, she is a Cuban American from Miami who lives with her wife, kids, and cats in the cool town of Denton, Texas. So everyone, I would love for you to put your virtual hands together and welcome Dr. Cruz. Hello.
Hi, everybody.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Love your attitude and
you.
your intro. And I think somebody even gave you a shout out about your calm demeanor.
Oh, thank you.
So good job. Thanks, everybody. I'm really excited to be here and really excited about the mission of UREP. And myself, I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of folks who work in international education and in higher education. So just excited to be here and have this opportunity to share some things with you that I've learned in working with people over the years and trying to do diversity education. So again, I'm Carmen Cruz. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm coming to you from Denton, Texas, which is in the north part of Texas, about 45 minutes south of Oklahoma and just north of Dallas. And this is also unceded land and territory that used to belong to the Caddo people. So to acknowledge that we are creative and living on people's lands who were here way before us. And so that is one of the ways we can also pay homage to people who, sorry. So it's looking at the chat about audio issues. So I'm gonna let Don and Shantia take care of that. And so, let's go to the first slide. And so one of the things that I have come to realize in the last, especially, I would say 2 to 4 or 5 years, is that this safety versus comfort is even more challenging. So prior to, for those of us who reside in the United States, things have become socio and politically, culturally, much more difficult in many ways. And so, what I'm showing here is for us educators and people who enjoy learning and teaching is that the comfort zone is where we all feel, of course, comfortable. And we need that. We need people in our lives, like our close people, the people we most connect with, to be in that and feel calm. As humans, neurologically, mind, body, spirit, we need that. We need to have comfort most of the time. We can't be in an uncomfortable or anxious position all the time. I mean, we can, but that also leads to obviously a lot of issues and problems in our mental health and emotional health. And so from an educational perspective, and especially around diversity, there's all these words in this stretch zone, the growth zone. It's, where you really can feel something different potentially. And so I hope that we can be in that yellow zone, because that's optimal learning also, because when we're more anxious, it's harder to learn. It's harder to have ourselves feel grounded and all together. So I invite us into this stretch. Okay, next slide. So part of what I've learned, and these are some givens that I've come to understand over the 25, 26 years or so I've been doing this. And I say everyone's a little biased with, maybe some people don't like that, and I feel like if you were raised in the United States over the last, 20 to 50 years, it is likely that you have heard negative things about certain groups. Now, there are some, obviously, families and cultures and people who don't at all say negative things about people and are really working on themselves to do that and be better humans all the way around, right? Especially for people who are different than us. But overall, we all have some implicit bias, and that's really hard to accept at times, and to the next point is that it's hard to accept, especially for people who are achievement oriented, into education, who have advanced degrees, because really we don't know what we don't know until we know it. And we know that in education, but when we get to a certain place, it's real difficult for a lot of people to be open to that true lifelong learner. And then I think some people can shift and see the benefit in that, and how we can role model to people earlier in their development of education, of attainment, to be open. And so then we have an opportunity to be a role model in that way. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit more when we get to our strategies. Another thing I've learned is that meeting people at an intersection of compassion works. Like, it really, really works. Maybe not every single time. Obviously, nothing, most things are not 100% and they're pretty gray, which is going to be a big part of our point today. And so along with that compassion that usually happens relationally, interpersonally, is that the single most effective way to eradicate all the isms and to work on, the mistreatment of certain groups is understanding that one-on-one connection. Because a lot of times people may not even have had the opportunity to talk to someone from that, let's say, group or culture that our family or our culture or our region sort of set us up to be an us and them dynamic. And so that's really important as well, is taking that risk to be outside of your comfort group of sameness. So, and then the last thing that I want to spend some time, this is going to be one of the pieces I want to really dip into a little bit more, is learning your stimulus value and exploring your own privilege identities. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about stimulus value in the upcoming slides. Okay, next slide. So how do we do this, right? So, and I don't know you all yet, and I think that I imagine most or all of you have done with this work, being in education, and so I want you to think about, take this opportunity, because you are educators, to just kind of sit back and reflect and have this opportunity. I know when I get to go to a training, I really enjoy it, because I am truly an avid learner. And if I had if I had all the money that I would need to study forever, I probably would be a student for the rest of my life. Um, and so your cultural filter. So what is that, right? So your cultural filter generally is made up of um, so many experiences, right? And then we create that we have throughout our lives, things we hear from other people, experiences we pick up socially as we transition from our family group being our primary group, and then we're looking for that who am I outside of my family. And so, but we keep a lot of those things that we hear in our most developmental years. And, neurologically, we all really have to create folders. We can't just have pieces of data in our brain. And so we have to have generalizations. And that's a big part of in diversity work is how do you sort through your generalizations folder essentially about a particular group and not make assumptions and not slip up and not say something offensive because you haven't done the other part of the work, which is the other part of the work. So, let's see. Okay. So one of the ways that we teach a multicultural competence is through a model that is KSA, which is knowledge, skills, and awareness. And so theoretically, knowledge, which is let's read about Latinos, let's read about African American history, let's read about how Asian American families are. So just to have sort of, again, some information, which is really important, just some general information about a certain group or culture. That's the knowledge piece. So then knowledge with awareness, that's the A, theoretically equals skills to use with people. And so when you think about knowledge, it's still, I even use the word general. You have like generalities about a certain group of people. The awareness and attitudes is research suggests and shows very specifically that the experiential portion of learning about diversity and multiculturalism and people who are different than us comes from experience, like lived experience, which can even be a film, really. It could be reading books, films. That's like one way to start. It's very comfortable for people is documentaries and, a way to learn about different cultures. But it's really in that getting out of your comfort zone that makes the biggest difference. And so that experiential work, where have you done that, and thinking about where have you done that in your own life. And so wanting you to start kind of deepening and thinking about, maybe groups you work with and thinking back, what did I hear about these groups? What did I hear about people of this descent or of this sexual orientation or gender identity or people with disabilities? And how do I feel about them? And so sometimes we just remain, we're not aware fully of how those things have impacted us, right? And so it's really important to get to know that lens and that perspective. Next slide. Oh, okay. The next slide is going to talk about, we're going to talk about stimulus value. And I know I mentioned that earlier, and maybe in international ed, that's not a term that's used very much. That's used in, I would say, a lot of multicultural competence literature within psychology and mental health and sociology maybe, but it is basically, so I want to define that for you. And what that means is, when I walk into a room, what is my stimulus, right? What is the value of that? And so what we know about diversity is that in our culture, in our world, in America, I'm talking about America, and I realize I'm talking to people who are very globally minded. But I'm talking about the United States, that's where we are, and I think that's where most of us work. And so what we know about identities is that there are some that have more social value and power, right? So, and power is a huge part of this because power is what leads to oppression. So power with prejudice equals oppression. And so stimulus value is a process of learning for yourself is when I walk into a room, what do people see? What do the students see? And what do I mean to those students, right? So I'm a Latina gay woman, and they may see, and a large woman also. And so, they may have a certain idea of like, oh, okay, she's a Latin person, she's Hispanic. And then here comes the folder, right? Like, well, what does that mean? And I'm going to bring up all my information about how Latin people are or Latino people are. And so that's something that I love to just take a minute and for you to think about what your stimulus value is and how that's changed. And so wondering if any of our participants would take a risk by either using their voice or by putting it in the chat and talking about your stimulus value just for a second. How do you think you come across? What do students see? And as you contemplate sharing with everybody, I will share that I know for me, it's changed with age. When I started, my first, I guess, postdoc job, I was 27, 28, and now I'm 51, right? And students see me differently because when I was 27 and I maybe looked 22, they thought I was still hip. They don't know I'm still hip, but what are you gonna do? And so, and I had a student assistant once and she's like, oh, Dr. Cruz, you're just like a hip dork. And I was like, okay, I'll take that. I'll take the I am very into education. So thanks, Felix. And so I'm wondering, what kind of thoughts are you having? What are you thinking about of like the story that person that you're serving or that you're teaching may have? What's their narrative about a person that looks like you? Even though you may do anti-racism work and you may lead a nonprofit and be an activist, but if, for instance, like I have a very close white Jewish male friend that he's just like, I wish people would understand, like maybe I'm not like maybe the stereotypic maybe white man in America right now that feel like a lot of people are like, oh, see, you can't, I don't know if I can trust this person, or this person always has privileges. And so I think it's important to try to be mindful and intentional about exploring your stimulus value, really maybe even finding a coworker or a colleague you trust. And now that we're virtual with anything, we could be anywhere with anybody. It doesn't have to be the person down the hall because there may not be anybody down the hall yet. And so you can have a call with somebody who wants an accountability partner. All right, Felix, let's hear what you got to say. Thank you.
Yep, and I'm just going to go ahead and invite you, Felix, and also Michael. So I'll start with Felix. Give me just 1 second here. I'm going to turn off my screen here because it looks like that's counted as a person.
And if anybody wants to also be on video, I think they can also share their video if they want to speak with us, right?
Yes. Yep. But if not, just make sure you hit that toggle video to turn your camera off. So Felix, you should have received an invite to come on up.
All right, let's have a conversation. It looks like Felix, Michael, and Valentina want to share.
Excellent.
All right.
Oops, didn't mean to make you the center. Sorry about that.
It's can you all hear me?
Yes, and we can see you too.
I can see. Oh wow. Okay. Oh, good to know. All right. Well, I'm working from home today in our guest room. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Cruz and everybody else inviting me here today. I just thought it was very interesting, Dr. Cruz, what you mentioned about stimulus. What's the? I wrote it down. Stimulus value, and how it's something that I felt like I had to learn through my professional career, right? So as racially as an Asian person, I grew up in the Dominican Republic, so I actually identify as Latinx, right? So also I was an international student here. So often when I approach students, my conversation, my conversation of my experience in the United States starts usually at starting college, right? So everything they mentioned prior to college, for me, it's an unknown factor. But also they look at someone like me, but often the things that I shared, examples of my behaviors, might not match to what they see physically. Mm-hmm. Obviously, I like to talk with my hands, and that's something that I feel is very culturally developed. Yes. There's things like that. So, but I do agree that it become a tool for me, and become and with time, obviously, like now I think I can manage that a lot better and use that as a tool to as I work with students. And I'm a international educator, but obviously there's a lot of cross-cultural competencies. You talk about case A, those type of thing, which is something we focus on a lot. So I just want to mention I really appreciate that and how it had changed for me personally. But that actually something I had to be aware about. You talk about awareness and really learn how to take advantage of that stimulus value for each one of us. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Absolutely. And it's not a one-step process. It's not like, oh, today I'm a little sexist today. I'm going to go to a training for 2 hours and then now I'm not, right? Like it's a lot of intentionality. I truly believe as a psychologist at this point in my career is that if you inject intentionality into something, it will be better just by definition. All right. So I think Michael is up now.
Michael, I sent you an invite. So you just have to accept it and you should be able to pop on in, Michael.
Hi, I like the your demeanor, and I like where we're going to with this dialogue. I've made an interesting. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, because I don't know what's going on, but we've got a storm looming in Florida. Thank God, Carmen, you've left Florida. You're in Texas, so it's fine. This interesting comment I have is when I enter a room, and I'm a professor at Nova Southeastern University. As long as I don't speak, I'm a neutral force in the room. But the minute I raise my voice about inclusion, diversity, microaggressions, or something like that, you can see it move from conflict to contempt. So I'm a nuisance value once I start to speak. I just want to make that point known. But as long as I don't speak, I'm one of the crowd. So it's fine.
That is a great point. That is a great point because some of us who are different and who are more maybe culturally or ethnically diverse, definitely have endured the difference of being seen versus being heard. So I really, really appreciate that comment because I think that can help others understand this at a deeper level. Thank you, Michael.
Okay,
Absolutely.
Valentina.
Both of these examples, I mean, yeah, I could go on and on about both examples, but let's get Valentina's input and then we can keep going with our slides.
Mm-hmm. And Valentina, you should have received the invite. Hopefully it should pop up on your screen. If you're still there, I hope you are. There you are. Hi.
Hi. Good morning. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me. I think this is the first time I'm actually hearing about the term stimulus value, and I think it's very important for the work within international education as well as just diversity and inclusion work as well. When I think about the term stimulus value, I would say for myself, one of the this brings me back to also in psychology and in diversity work, it's like the oppression Olympics when you get in a room and everything, and it's like because I am because I'm this, I have been oppressed and everything, or because I'm this, I've suffered these types of traumas and things like that. So it's very interesting. So that's like one of the first things that come to mind when I think about stimulus value. As for myself, just coming from a space, stepping into a room and thinking about identity. First thing people see is, hey, a Black woman, she has locks in her hair. What is the first impression of that? But I'm so much more than my appearance, and so much more than I bring so much more in my experiences and things like that. So that's what I wanted to share.
Absolutely. Really appreciate it, Valentina. Nice to see our participants too. It's awesome. Absolutely. I mean, I used the term oppression Olympics a lot, actually, which is kind of funny, and pain Olympics, because they also intersect, right? Who's had more pain, a Black woman with a disability or like an Asian man, an international Asian man? Like you just get into, we can't compare our pain like that. And those of us who work with people, especially as healers, it's like, we have to work with your pain. and everybody's pain is valid. And that's why in the sort of concept of intention doesn't equal impact, what's so important there is that we have to hold both. Okay, so we're going to move to that. Let's go ahead to the next slide. And then I really just appreciate those of you who have shared and so many good examples of so many things. So if you were, again, raised in the United States in general, and I know for also in like Caribbean countries, and I know, Felix said you were raised in the DR. And, so I think in many areas we learn things that are negative against other people. So, and so many studies have now arisen out about implicit bias, which I'm sure all of you have heard about. And I know like every 4 or 5 years, I go back to that website, the Implicit Bias Test website. If you haven't done that, or maybe you and your staff could do it and compare, it's really vulnerable, but it's intentional. And it's the work. It's that stretch zone. And it's looking at your results and looking at them. And now they started with 30 years ago with one, and it was about black and white. Now there's like 14 implicit bias tests that you can take that are about different groups and about like sexual and gender diversity, about ability status, international. And it's really, really a wonderful education tool. Sometimes I take a test if it's like a specific group of people I'm talking with, and then I'll show my results that even though I've been doing this work forever, they're in there. They, we grow up, this is the psychologist in me talking, but, we grow up mostly seeking belongingness and with the group. And when you have that belongingness, shifting that and going against what this group says is very difficult. And we know that manifests in so many different ways in people's lives when, oh, you're not like this, like us. You're not like, when families are upset because let's say they have a particular religion and their child decides not to pursue that religion. So, okay, next slide. Want to keep us moving here. And just some of the impacts of stigma. I mean, one of my areas of research and interest clinically is especially in communities have been persecuted, like people of color, BIPOC, LGBTQ plus, have been very reluctant to seek help in therapy and mental health because of the discrimination of therapists, and for a long time, we weren't training psychotherapists or psychologists, mental health counselors in diversity work. And it was just called individual differences. And that didn't really capture. So, what we have to think about is that if you hear a statistic like, 40% of gay youth attempt suicide. Well, that doesn't mean that their little sweet little gay brain was injected with this or had this. It was just because we put that person in a stigmatized society. And so it's not, so some people see it as like the other way around, if that makes sense. So we want to remember that our minority siblings, brothers, sisters have, really endured experiences that we have not. And there's so many areas of diversity. You may be a person of color who is cisgender and heterosexual and hasn't experienced maybe other issues that your, colleagues, friends that are of a different gender. And that nowadays is even more. I mean, we're learning so much from our youth about the possibility of gender by them risking themselves by coming out in that way. Okay, good. Next slide. So intention doesn't equal impact. So this is the crux of what I truly, truly believe is one of the biggest problems in DEI work, because we get so defensive. It is natural to get defensive. It is, if somebody says, hey, you really impacted me when you made that statement in that meeting, and I just want to check it out with you. And that just really hurt when you said that about, Native American people. So, and then the first response might be like, what do you mean? I don't even understand. Like, what? I'm not racist. I did not say that in that way. That's not what I meant. That's not what I meant. And that's, so, it's a very natural, reaction. And so what we want is a pause of intentionality. If a colleague, a friend, a person, another human being comes toward us and says something, what we want is that pause. Just let me pause and think like, okay, that makes me feel defensive, and then try to respond versus react. And so how do we hold somebody's good intention? They did not mean to say anything. And at the same time, holding the and, not the but. It's not either or, but it's and. It's both and. How do we hold two truths that collide with each other? Two coexisting truths. Like, I did not have bad intention. I had good intention. That's one. Well, you made an impact and that hurt my feelings. And now I'm not sure how to take that. And I want to talk it through with you, so now you have these things colliding and they need to be able to coexist, right? So that's something I want us to keep thinking about. And that's something that I think is important for you to, spread and teach students, especially because I know in the classrooms can get spicy. Classrooms can get really, really spicy these days. And especially in the context of our political divide and our people call it political divide, and I just call it people divide, because we are a divided people. And as you all know, it's manifesting in a way around public health that it doesn't really need to be. So next slide. Okay. Perfect segue. How has the pandemic impacted or changed how we communicate? So with the text exchange earlier, that was very clear that was a microaggression, and a colleague friend trying to lift the other person up, again, with good intention. That was such a perfect way to describe intention doesn't equal impact, because both parties, one had good intentions, thumbs up, yeah, you'll get a job. And then the other person's like, wait, what? It's like when somebody said to me a million times growing up, like, oh my gosh, you throw so good for a girl. And it's like, okay, like, you're not sure. You leave a situation sometimes, and as a minority in that way, and think, was that a compliment? But they just said something like, oh, you're pretty good you throw like a girl. So you sort of leave like it's a compliment, but it's also a jab. And I give an example in a TEDx talk that I do, that my first big talk when I was about 28 at Texas Women's University. I've been here for 24 years. And the person, a young white man from a small town in Texas, comes to me and says, ma'am, you're the smartest Hispanic I've ever met. And he was just so excited. I had done a talk on, I think, like Latino families or something in Texas or something like that. And, it was really, really hard, because the pause, I responded to him and I said, thank you. I'm really glad you enjoyed the talk. And then I invited him to a few like diversity dialogues we had. And, I have to have compassion and recognize that he may be the only Latino. If he ever saw any Latinos in his hometown, it might have been day laborers, or it might have been only people serving. And things like that, not somebody talking at a university. So important to think about that as well. So one of the things I wanted to talk about specifically about the pandemic / the person divide is what we have gone through over the last, oh goodness, it's hard to say really, but for sure the last couple of years with the pandemic, and also with the last presidential election, and all the events that are related to diversity. For instance, our last president in America banning, diversity information being dispensed in institutions of higher education. Which is even hard to understand how that happened, or how that could happen. And so all of those things have led to people then in general being more anxious to approach, right? So one of my big strategies for you is going to be like, you got to move in. You got to move in and have these conversations. Because a lot of times when I was talking about that defensiveness, we say, oh no, I'm going to move out. Like, I'm not going to get involved in this, right? And so, so I think, I want you to know that research shows it, but it's just, we are showing it. We are showing increased anxiety And we already have a little bit higher level of anxiety because of a pandemic. I mean, most of us were not in 1918 going through the last pandemic, and we would never have thought ever that, I mean, I never thought I would be part of a pandemic. Like, whoever has that thought, right? And so I think that one of the things that's really important is to just notice that anxiety. Notice that maybe, let's say you're a very privileged identity person, like white appearing, cis, hetero, things that are more valued in our culture and have more power. And that might make you more anxious sometimes to talk with people of color or talk about these issues, because there are so many divides. I mean, we're not allowed, you know, we're like, do I ask you how you identify? How do I ask you for your pronouns? Like, there's so many conversations we need to have to understand the human. Like with Felix's example, his physical self, right, may not match when he says, oh yeah, I identified as Latinx and I was raised in the DR in Dominican Republic. And then it might be like, but wait, you don't, you know, so there's so much complexity. And that's only one physical identity, a visible identity. We have no idea anybody's story. And one takeaway is, like, if you are privileged enough to hear a person's story, you're privileged to hear that and to hear more levels of their intersections and complexity. Okay, I'm gonna go to the next slide because I'm noticing the time. Okay, so very important, and we'll just spend very little time on this so I can get to the main 3 strategies I want to talk about as we have 10 or so minutes left. So these are important concepts. So I've talked about intentionality already a lot. Connection, I talked about a little bit at the beginning in terms of one-on-one connection, trying to have friends, colleagues, people that are different, you know, and putting yourself in different spaces, maybe going to a different kind of cultural event, you know, going to different restaurants, go to an Ethiopian restaurant, go to a Greek restaurant. You know, we're used to like, oh, we're going Italian, Chinese, like we can expand ourselves. We can really learn so much about people's cultures by experiencing what they offer and the diversity that they offer us. And then compassion, I talked about as well, in terms of really trying to have an open heart around what minorities of a particular group or situation may have been through, and to try to understand that at a deeper level for yourself. And then the third one is, of course, conversation. And then that's what I want to focus on in the next few slides is, how do we do that? I'm really scared to do that. How do I do that? So the first one, next slide, or 2 slides, strategy 1, admit. So this is the first strategy, which is to admit to yourself at the very least that, you know, you have some biases, you know. And I know, like, I'll give a quick example that my father, Cuban man, Cuban immigrant, very, you know, machista. And also in our Cuban culture, my parents are lighter skinned, and in our culture, we learned a lot of racism, you know. And if it was a Black Cuban, that's different, right? Because they're Cuban. So, you know, so I think that there's first is admit it. Do the implicit bias test. Check yourself. Do it privately. Find an accountability partner if you want that. That could be really beneficial. It's hard to admit as educators and as people that are achievement oriented that we have some biases that we still need to keep working on. Okay, next slide. Strategy 2 is going back to the KSA model I presented, which is about, how do I experience this? How do I push myself to be with others who are different than me? As I said earlier, you know, our sense of belongingness is really important. And again, it's important to feel comfortable and have your people, but your people may not have to be homogeneous either, right? So it's important to try to stretch yourself in that way. And that's what we tell students to do. You know, I frequently give, and this is a perfect example for this group, I frequently give this example to people who know nothing about study abroad. And I say, why do you think study abroad works for students? Is that they go somewhere else and they realize, there's so much more, and there's so many things that we don't know, and especially if they can do it earlier in their lives, what a gift to learn that. Okay, next slide. And then that's the biggest one, which is the conversation, and not saying I'm out. That is such a common response, and it's really lean in, move in. In group therapy, a lot of times the first session I'll say, I'm not going to call you out. This is not about calling you out. There's a nurturing space. There's a place to grow, though, and growth takes some pain. And I'm gonna call you forward. I'm gonna call you in to the circle. I'm not gonna call you out and make you feel shame, because shame is definitely a destructive emotion. And so, as we know, emotions about multicultural issues can be complex. I think we have a certain sense of ourselves and our level of vulnerability that we can take. And there's a line, and it's like, if you can sometimes push yourself over that line, it can be really helpful to allow yourself to be vulnerable, and taking these risks. And I know that they're very difficult. And so I looked up many images to see, and I found this really cute one that I had never seen. It's like, what are other words for move toward? Because that's what we want to do in a kind, intentional way, is I want to move toward you and get to know you. And then there's all these words: near, reach, close, move, surround, contact, etc. Next slide. Okay. And then, so one main point I want to make here as we wrap up is that, and I just spoke about vulnerability and owning our own imperfections. Nobody is perfect at this, and neither are people who have multiple minority identities, because they also have biases. I have multiple minority identities, and I have biases, that I still have to wrangle with and admit and work with at times, and so I think that's important. So the main point here at the end is, some of our minority friends and colleagues are also emotionally fatigued. There is so much emotional labor that goes into having to teach others about your own culture or how to treat you. So there's some work we need to do on our own, and there's some work we need to do with others. So there's many ways of doing that. I think it's important to hold that. It's also, if you take that risk, it's important to know with who. Somebody maybe you're a little bit closer with, because as a minority, it may be like, no, I can't do this right now. I can't try to educate you in this moment. I feel vulnerable, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that there has to be, again, another both and, another holding of two coexisting realities of, well, look, I want to learn, and I'm asking this person of color, and then they're getting upset because, they're tired. Well, they're tired, and we are tired, and there is fatigue. There's emotional and spiritual fatigue around persecution. And so I think it's really, really important to hold that as well. And so I'm going to close my portion here and turn it back to Shantia, who is going to close with some Q&A and a quote.
Okay. Thank you so much. Let me just get the camera back, and then Dawn, I'm also going to pull you up as well. Just give me 1 second here. All right, so we just have a quote here. Or would you like to do the Q&A first? Maybe we can do the Q&A. Maybe we can start right there. And see, Dawn, are you, I think I can hear you. I'm not sure if I can hear you. Well, I can start with the first question. So thank you so much. I do see that there is one in our Q&A section, which is, are there positive effects of social stigma, such as resilience, self-determination, hard work versus hard worker? What do you think?
Yes, that's a great question. Absolutely, yes. And I think that's where some of the tired comes from. If you follow, there's a lot of Instagram is really wonderful for uplifting people, especially, and teaching people about issues of discrimination and hardship. And so indeed, that's a positive effect. Like, I know I can live my life knowing, like, I feel proud of being who I am. I feel proud of all the unearned privileges that I have earned, right? Because of privileges that I have earned all over my life because of hard work. So that teaches you grit, resilience, strength. And you know what? We're tired of always being strong too, right? So I just want to share both sides of that. All of those are very true. And we can feel pride in ourselves. And it doesn't have to be that hard for everybody. Like a lot of people, like I used to tell my students 20 years ago, like I just need to shift is what I used to call it. Shape. I have to shift. I've been doing it for 25 years to get myself into rooms that make decisions. And so I had to try to live and work within the values of professionalism and work made from mostly white males. And so a Latina that uses her hands and talks loud and is very expressive and positive I've had two bosses say, like, can you just tone it down a little bit? Like sometimes you're a little bit like loud. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I think that's just again, it's always a gray in both ends. It's very difficult for things to actually be so binary or dichotomous.
I do see another question as well from Michael, and he asked, how will you equip sufferers of microaggressions to respond and not react? That's an excellent question.
Yeah, absolutely. And response, not reaction, is a tool we try to teach in psychotherapy, because we have like this 1 second pause that we could be like, oh my God, what am I going to do with all this anger? And then smile and be like, okay, I'm supposed to be calm now. So Michael, I hear you. It is very difficult. That's exactly. I mean, Shanti, I'm sure you've been through experiences like this, right? Leaving a conversation thinking like, what just happened there? Right?
Absolutely. I've most definitely had something similar. One really quick example, I've had someone tell me that I touch my hair too much during a meeting, for example. Because, as a Black woman, we're always changing our style and our hair. We can do braids, we can do curls, we can do whatever. And a coworker who was not a person of color made that comment in the middle of a meeting, and it was just like,
oh my gosh,
what do I do? It wasn't intentionally. So just having to kind of take that and just breathe to kind of get
Absolutely.
past it. Yes.
Yeah. So Michael, I think that the only response I can give you right now is that pause, and to have choice in being able to express whether or not you want to engage in that. Mm-hmm. Like, how long do you want to be, so I think it depends who's the person. There's so many contextual variables. Like, is it somebody who has power over you? Is it somebody at work that you have to kind of perform for at times because you're going to have a performance evaluation? I mean, literally, we are evaluated on our performance. So I think that, can we have indeed NSU? Well, I think that there are many, many, many institutions of higher education that are trying sometimes and creating, DEI groups and leaders, and many places have a long way to go, a long, long way to go. Absolutely. So the pause is what I could give you, Michael, and the choice. Like, you don't got to take it all on, brother. You don't have to take it all on. And it's taken me years to learn that. And I have dispensed a lot of emotional labor, whether if it was in a talk, like in a professional situation, where I didn't charge money for probably the first 12 years of my career to do any speaking engagements. But I didn't have mentors, right, to teach me that, for also a lot of different reasons. So yeah, pause and choice.
Excellent. And just in the comments as well, I see that Dawn shared Dr. Cruz's website. So most definitely, please, everyone, take a visit, go to our website, connect. So just want to make sure that you all have that resource. And I'm going to close up. It looks like we're a little bit over here, but I just like to share that, you've all heard of the golden rule before, but how many of you have heard of the platinum rule, which is do unto others as they'd like done unto them? So please keep this in mind as we continue to engage with each other, as we continue to experience and just have our feelings throughout this pandemic. You know, it's been a very tough year and a half, and, you know, the future is currently unknown. So let's just find ways to support and uplift each other. And so remember, think of that platinum rule there. Excellent. So, Dr. Cruz, oh my goodness, thank you. You were incredible. Thank you so much for joining us today. It was wonderful having you. And everyone, please, if you haven't done so already, subscribe to our newsletter, the You Up Abroad newsletter, which there should be a call of action button right on the bottom of your screen right there. So subscribe to You Up Abroad. Please do so. I think Don will also put the link in our chat box. And you can also find us on any social media, really, but the main two that we use actively would be our LinkedIn page and our Facebook page, which is at You Rep Abroad. And we're also on Twitter and Instagram, but LinkedIn and Facebook are our two main ones. So everyone, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. A copy of this recording and our survey to see how you felt will be emailed to all of you. So please give us your opinion and what else you would like to learn in the future. So thank you, everyone. Wishing you the best Thursday. Thank you. Take care. Thank you. Bye, everyone.